Vinyl, Scratch, and Octavia made their way through the heavy forest. They had been walking for about an hour since their carriage dropped them off along the highway where the trail towards the campsite began, and by now, the trail had disappeared.
Are you sure we're going in the right direction? It feels like we should have been there by now. The sign said the site was only 3 miles down the trail.
Of course, it's the mountains. It feels like it's only been an hour, but it's probably only been like 20 minutes. We'll be there in no time.
She replied, struggling to continue carrying all the camping supplies.
I think we may have had to go the other direction in that fork in the path back there.
Don't worry, my family used to go camping all the time. I totally know what I'm doing.
Vinyl said to reassure Octavia. "15 more minutes passed, and still no campsite appeared. Suddenly, they walked into the middle of a clearing in the forest that seemed to come out of nowhere. It looked like it could be a campsite, but no other ponies were around. The two friends walked around the area and inspected it. The sound of water could be heard, meaning a river must be nearby.
Hello? Any pony here?
No reply.
This must be it.
I don't think so, Vinyl. There's no pony around. We've just arrived at a clearing in the forest, and we've obviously been going the wrong way.
Yeah, you're probably right. But anyway, we can just settle here. Might as well get the full camping experience, right?
She said with a very nonchalant attitude. She dropped the bag of supplies off her back and magicked the zipper open.
How are we going to find our way back, Vinyl? There is no trail, and we've just been wandering through the forest.
I don't know. We could just try to remember our way back or something. It can't be too hard. Besides, I have pony GPS to find our way through anywhere, so we can't get lost.
Octavia didn't even bother arguing with that. There was no winning with Vinyl because she always invented her own laws of reality to explain herself.
Well then, if we are going to settle here, let's go ahead and set up camp.
Octavia took the box containing the tent out of her bag and dropped it in front of Vinyl.
You can set up the tent, and I'll go for a walk around the area.
Vinyl levitated the instructions out of the box and looked at them. They were in Korean.
Oh, don't worry.
Octavia cut her off.
There are some tools in that bag. There should be a hammer in there in case you need to drive some spikes into the ground.
Octavia began walking in the direction from which she heard the running water. The river was actually only about 100 meters away. The trees ended abruptly, and she walked out onto the beach of a beautiful river bend. This must be the Pony Colorado River, she thought to herself. There was a steep hill on the other side covered in pine trees, and the wind made them all sway in unison, giving the appearance that the hill was rocking back and forth. The openness of everything gave Octavia a better taste of the crisp October air. As the wind continued to blow, it whistled through the tree branches and ruffled her mane. She trotted down to the rocks right by the river and observed the water flowing past. There was a boulder in the middle of it, which the current was running into, creating a little bit of white water. Looking down, small minnows were swimming by, and jumped away when she stuck her hoof in a bit. The whole landscape was beautiful to her. The sound of the wind, creaking and whistling trees, the flowing water was like a symphony of nature. And she had front row seats.
I just love nature,
she said out loud to herself. Then she remembered that she left Vinyl alone with a hammer and decided to return to camp to check on her. When she got back, she was surprised to find that Vinyl had successfully assembled the tent. But what caught her attention was how small the thing was. Vinyl didn't seem to be bothered by it and was rather proud of her achievement.
Well, now that the toilet tent is set up, where do we sleep?
Octavia looked at her, disappointed.
That's it.
What? But there has to be another part to it. This can't be the whole thing.
Vinyl seemed afraid.
No, that box is all we brought. There were no other parts.
But this is the Weathermaster 9000. We're supposed to be able to go anywhere in this.
And I'm sure we will. Just as soon as the wind picks up. I thought you knew what you were doing when you went to the Pony Sports Chalet.
Of course I did.
Did you ask for help to find the most suitable thing?
Yes.
Octavia sighed.
And when he asked you questions to help you out, did you pay attention to every question he asked you?
She hated having to treat Vinyl like a child.
Yes.
She thought for a moment, rolled her eyes, and said,
Maybe not.
Octavia put a hoof over her face.
Well, we're just going to have to deal with it. Now, I hope when I told you to pack everything that you remembered to get the food together.
Well, I couldn't fit everything in the bag, so sacrifices had to be made. Besides, the campsite is supposed to have a barbecue every Saturday.
Octavia looked at her sternly.
We're not at the campsite, are we?
Vinyl just gave a blank stare in return.
Now, what are we going to eat instead?
Vinyl first looked at a pile of rocks, then at a pine cone, and finally said to Octavia,
I don't know.
With her mind already made up, Octavia said,
The most reasonable food option is fish. There was a river flowing just beyond those trees. I think I saw some trout swimming by. So, you are going to fetch us 2 fish.
But I don't know how.
Well, you said you and your family went camping all the time. And you're a unicorn, a very smart one at that. I'm sure you can figure something out.
Vinyl walked in the direction her friend had pointed and was standing at a bed of a river after only a few meters of walking. She trotted to the edge of the river where the water was flowing only a few inches from her hooves. Sure enough, she could see a few trout swimming by, their silver skins shining in the early evening sun. But how to catch them? She remembered she had seen on Pony National Geographic that bears just stick their open mouths into the water and pull out a wiggling fish. So, Vinyl knelt down, opened her mouth, and threw her head into the water. She came out with a mouthful of gravel and a soaking wet mane. There had to be a better way of doing this. She thought about available materials. Sticks all around her, some extra twine in the camping bag, maybe a hook or two. Nothing useful. Then she came up with an idea. She dug a few inches into the ground until she came upon a few earthworms. She levitated one up to her head and then tied it around her horn. She stuck her head into the water, and soon she could feel a slippery mouth attach itself to her horn. Octavia heard Vinyl coming back through the trees. That was quick, she thought. Vinyl marched her way right over to her friend with a great look of pride on her face and a fish latched to her horn. Octavia looked utterly shocked and disgusted.
Here you go, Tabby.
She said, lowering her head to shake the fish off onto a plate Octavia had out. Vinyl walked back through the trees and came back several minutes later with the second fish on her horn. Octavia's expression hadn't changed.
Why did you... I'm not even going to ask.
So what do we do now?
We cook them, and I'll do this part. I've done it before, and, well, this part involves fire, and I think you shouldn't be involved.
Okay, I'm going to go skip rocks.
Vinyl said without listening much. By the time they had finished eating, it was dark already.
Your breath smells like fish, Tavi.
Octavia gave her a deadpan look.
Oh, by the way, I did pack the marshmallows.
And none of the rest of the food items that were smaller?
Well, they fit.
Vinyl picked up a couple of good sticks for them. The two friends roasted marshmallows and spent the rest of the night stargazing and watching for shooting stars.
You know, this night actually turned out very nice.
Octavia said, lying on the ground next to Vinyl and looking up at the sky. It was certainly a nice night. They were lying on the riverbed and had a crystal clear view of the night sky without any light pollution Ponyville got from nearby Canterlot and Manhattan. They could even see the Milky Way making a sparkly, shapeless band across their plane of view. The moon was full and bright.
Hey, Tavi? You know how lots of ponies think that Equestria used to be dominated by humans over 1,000 years ago?
Octavia smiled.
That's just crazy. Where could they have gone? The ruins everywhere are from a more ancient race of ponies. It's just a myth.
Well, you know. Ponies also say that when they were around, humans even went to the moon and walked around on it, and their footprints are still there today.
Vinyl said excitedly.
Well now, that's impossible. Every pony knows only Luna can go to the moon because she's the only one with the right magic.
They spent the rest of their night looking at the stars and conversing until it came time to roll out the sleeping bags and get to bed.
Vinyl, where is my sleeping bag?
I don't know. Probably in the bag. You were the one who packed it.
But I didn't pack it. I asked you to pack it.
So it's not in the bag?
No.
Well, I guess we'll have to...
No. It has to be in there somewhere. I'm not going to share a sleeping bag with you.
She searched the contents of the bag, the tent, and the entire clearing, but her sleeping bag was nowhere to be found. Octavia and Vinyl exchanged blank looks.
No, I won't do it. I am not sleeping with you.
Why not?
Well, because you're, well, you know, and your sleeping bag, it smells like you.
Vinyl looked back at her, slightly unhappy.
And also, I do not sleep with other mares.
Half an hour later, though, she found herself cramped into the same 2.5 square meters as her best friend.
Think of it this way. We won't get cold.
The implications in that make me feel so much more worse about this.
Then, Vinyl got a dirty look on her face and said,
Hey, Tavi. That oven.
She pulled the covers over both of them. Octavia got a strong whiff of sulfur. She kicked Vinyl in the stomach as hard as she could and jumped out of the bed while Vinyl was coughing and regaining her wind.
That's it. I am not sleeping with you.
Vinyl had the nerve to act surprised.
Really? But where are you going to sleep instead?
I would honestly rather sleep outside than in that smelly sleeping bag of yours.
A sudden clap of thunder and a flash of lightning followed by a downpour made her instantly change her mind.
On second thought, maybe it's not so bad.
Wasn't it just completely clear outside a little while ago?
Octavia said nothing in response. She got back into the sleeping bag, turned away from Vinyl, and tried her best to go to sleep. Vinyl was the first one to wake up in the morning. She opened her eyes and was looking right at Octavia's sleeping face. She looked so peaceful and happy.
Cute,
she thought. But then the sleepy grogginess began to wear off and she realized whose foreleg was around her, and that her hind leg was not in fact between two pillows. She cried out, quickly getting out of the sleeping bag. Brushing herself off, she could see Octavia beginning to wake up.
Oh, good morning, Vinyl,
she said through a yawn.
Nothing. how'd you sleep?
Well, not too great, considering I had to sleep on solid ground and share a sleeping bag with you.
I'm going to start a fire.
declared Vinyl.
Okay, but be extremely careful. We wouldn't want you burning down a field again or something.
Octavia sat up in the sleeping bag and let out a great big yawn as she stretched. She tried arching her back to relieve some of the soreness from sleeping on a hard, flat surface. Octavia left the tent and looked up at the sun.
Isn't it curious how quickly the weather changed? It was a clear night, and then it rained, and now it's sunny.
Mountain weather.
Vinyl replied. She picked up a stick, jammed a couple of marshmallows onto it, and started roasting them over the fire.
Really? Marshmallows for breakfast?
Vinyl looked at her marshmallows, then back at her friend, confused.
Anyway, how are we going to get out of here again? Since we don't exactly know the way.
Easy. I've still got that GPS. We'll be out of here in 10 seconds flat.
She went to pull the device out of her bag, then she added,
By the way, the P stands for pony.
Well, turn it on. Let's find out where we are.
Vinyl powered on the device and it began to connect to a signal.
Here we go. It says, please take device to an authorized retailer to activate before use.
Octavia put a hoof to her face.
Well, looks like we'll just have to find our way out the old-fashioned way.
You mean...
Octavia started to seem angry.
You mean we're lost?
Yes.
We're lost in the middle of the forest because you can't do anything right.
She was beginning to get hysterical. Her mane started to puff out and look ragged.
We're gonna be stuck here for days, weeks, months. But by then we'll starve. We'll starve to death and they'll never find our bodies. We'll just disappear. Oh my God.
She was jumping about the place, panicking at this point. Vinyl was still just sitting there eating her marshmallows.
Calm down, Tavi. You're starting to act like Twilight.
That's it.
Octavia snapped at her.
I am not dying in the forest with you. I'm going to find my own way out.
She galloped into the trees in a completely random direction. The panic was running through her body and her heart was racing. She could feel a tear or two roll down her face. She only ran a few dozen meters or so, though, before she tripped over a rock and began tumbling out of control through the woods. Everything started to blur, and she lost all sense of direction. Then she stopped rolling and found herself in the middle of another clearing of the forest. She was lying on solid concrete. Octavia stood up, turned around, and found several other ponies with tents looking at her. She froze for a few seconds, and then backed into the trees again to return to their sight.
Hey, Vinyl,
She said, returning to their clearing.
could you come with me for a second? I want to ask you about something.
Not considering that the very recently livid Octavia might be dragging her into the woods for a panicked cannibalization, she followed. They walked the same path that Octavia ran, and arrived at a new clearing. Other ponies had gone back to their business.
What is this?
Vinyl thought for a second and said,
Oh, this is the campsite.
Octavia jerked her head towards Vinyl, shocked out of her mind.
What? We were just right next to the campsite the whole time?
Yep, I guess so. Wanna move over here and stay another night?
Octavia could feel a brush fire of anger spreading through her body as she realized that Vinyl's poor judgment had ruined their camping holiday for nothing. Thinking of what to do next, she simply hung her head down and said,
Vinyl, you are an idiot.
There was a long pause before she continued.
I guess I did have a fun time after all. I mean, there were a few speed bumps, but it was a real experience. It really wasn't that miserable after all. I don't think we would have had nearly an interesting time if we had just stayed here instead. But there was the part where we slept together. I wouldn't do that twice, but I guess it would have happened here too.
Well, that's alright, Tabby. I had a great time too. But yeah, except for sleeping together. I didn't like that either.
How about we don't spend an extra night? I think I'd like to go home and sleep in my own bed by myself tonight.
Yeah, you're right. I kinda want to do the same, but in my bed, not yours. Hey, I have an idea. Why don't you write a letter to the princess about what you've learned?
Me?
Octavia didn't understand.
I thought that was just something Twilight and her friends do because Princess Celestia asked them to.
Well, the CMC wrote a letter a couple of times, and she doesn't care about them.
Well, alright. I'll do one tonight and ask Spike to send it when we get back.
That night in the living room of their apartment in Ponyville, Octavia got a quill in her mouth with some paper and began writing a letter.
Dear Princess Celestia, though I'm not a student of yours, I've learned a valuable lesson about friendship. Sometimes a situation can become bad due to mistakes and misfortunes that may not be within your control. But you always have to make the best of a bad situation and try to have fun anyway.
Then she thought for a moment.
I also learned that if you want something done right, it's best to do it yourself. Trust is important, but you should never put all your trust into anyone, even your closest friends, especially a particular pony who sometimes forgets to turn the water on for a shower. Your faithful subject, Octavia.
Vinyl trotted over as Octavia slipped the last paragraph of her letter underneath an unused second sheet of paper.
Finished?
Mm-hmm. By the way, when you say you and your family used to go camping all the time?
Oh yeah. We went to places like Pony Yosemite, the Pony Grand Canyon, Pony Arches National Park.
Yeah? But when you camped at those places, did you use a tent?
Of course not, silly. We always rented an RV.
Octavia rolled her eyes and folded her letter to send off later.